Yeah, 15 and a half minutes past 9 o'clock. You're listening to YUR 101.5 FM. It's the morning magazine. We are with you right through till 11 o'clock. Then Alan Jones will take the microphone and present a national perspective. In the meantime, you have the top of the hours where we have the local news team out the back working very hard to dig right into the stories to bring to you with a local perspective. We are looking at the Moreton Bay Regional Council Division 11 leading up to the April 28 election. That's under 2 weeks away. And that's where you get to exercise your democratic right as to who's going to represent you at both a councillor level and the mayoralship. And, you know, that's your opportunity to set the direction as to where the council's headed beyond April 28. In the studio, having been the fact that we're looking at Division 11, we have both Craig Dunn and Kate Hall in the studio. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Good morning, listeners.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Andrew, and thank you to 101.5 FM to invite us today. Thank you.
There you go. The very, very first thing we'll do is we'll get in and we'll get to know who you are. Craig Dunn, where have you come from, and why now are you putting your hand up? What's Craig Dunn all about?
Okay, no worries. Thank you, Andrew. Look, I actually live in Narangba. I have so for many years. Been married with two children who both attend local schools. I've been committed to my community with a lot of different community organisations. I'm involved in different boards, and ultimately what's happened is why I'm running is that people out there continue to speak, whether it's friends or colleagues, continue to talk about how poor the council's been performing. One of what triggered for me was that in the January 2011, after the floods, how poorly the council actually handled that situation. So yeah, I decided after speaking with a few people to nominate and see if I can do a better job and bring a fairer share out to Narangba. I'm actually self-employed. I own my own business. I have bought the business relationship licence for conveyancing work solicitors throughout the Moreton Bay region. So on a daily basis, I'm dealing with real estate agents, financiers, business people, clients, and what have you. And as part of that, also just in general discussion over the last 2 years, actually, I've just the comments even about how council's been performing. So, they're things that have really jogged me along. I'm also involved, I've also for 15 years prior to all of this worked in the water industry in both local and state government in New South Wales and in southeast Queensland. So I think that perspective will assist with the water issues and Unity Water and what have you. But also, I've had banking and finance and hospitality, worked in those industries, so got a good mix and think that I'd be a good councillor.
Terrific. We'll take a look at some of the issues a little bit later. Kate Hall, what about you? Where have you come from, and what's persuaded you to put your hand up at this point in time?
Well, I was born outside of Chicago, and I had a ranch in Wyoming.
Oh, you're international.
Yes, and then I met my wonderful husband, who's Australian, Ivan, and we have 7 children. 11 grandchildren, and we have a property outside of Coomba between Narangba and Dayboro.
And no TV.
Pardon?
No TV.
No TV, yes. No, we have TV, but it's not very good reception.
That'll explain it, yep.
Yes. I've been involved in many things. What I loved most, I started out in nursing. My training was in nursing. So I've always kind of helped people. I've really enjoyed property management, which was taking care of close to between 400 and 500 properties. I did
so you went from nursing to becoming a property manager?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Yes. Well, when I came over, I couldn't work as nursing without taking a lot of studying, and it hadn't been a long time since I had been a nurse. And Ivan had a real estate company, and so property management just kind of suited me. So I kind of took care of the property manager and the tourism part of it. I look at the waste. I look at our transparency and the accountability for the council. I look at our confidential meetings, and I've been the one that counted every one in every meeting. We've had 374 confidential items. And I think back to my property management days, and I think,
how many confidential meetings is that with those confidential items?
Well, those are just what appears in the minutes.
Okay.
That does not include any of the confidential workshops or any of the in-house confidential meetings that we have no idea what's involved there in numbers. It seems like we own the council, and we need them to be accountable for us. Without transparency, if we don't know what's happening, we have no accountability.
You're listening to 4AUR 101.5 FM. It's a morning magazine. We're taking a close look at Division 11 with both Kate Hall and Craig Dunn. They're both candidates that have put their hand up. They want to represent that area and be elected at April 28. We have also invited the incumbent, Bob Miller, but he's declined the invitation. We'll be right back after this break. Yeah, we're right on 23 minutes past 9. You're listening to 4AUR 101.5 FM. It's the morning magazine with you right through till 11 o'clock. In the meantime, we are having a chat with both Kate Hall and Craig Dunn. They are candidates for Division 11, heading on into the Moreton Bay Regional Council elections, which will be held on the 28th of April. Remember, get down there and exercise your democratic right to decide the direction of the council for the next 4 years. Just quickly, Kate Hall, how long have you been campaigning for?
22 years.
22 years you've been campaigning for this election.
Well, I've been watching the council for 22 years, and probably very closely the last 7.
Okay, if you've been watching the council for the last 22 years, closely for the last 7, the Moreton Bay Regional Council as such has been around for effectively just over 4 years now, 4
Yes.
years, and you can count the days. Why? What has there been much of a difference? What have you seen over that 22 years? Was it good up until 7 years ago? Why did you start looking at it closely? And has it got much worse over the last 4 years?
It's pretty much the same. Pine Rivers have brought a lot of their ideas into Moreton Bay Regional Council.
Were they good ideas?
I don't think so. I'd like to see some real changes made to the openness of our council, that people feel welcome in our council, that they are listened to. After all, you pay our salaries. The council, the people, the ratepayers pay our salaries. You have a right to deserve respect and to be listened to, no matter how little your problem is. Because if you take the time to contact me or Craig or anyone else, it is important to you.
Keeping in mind what you've just said there, does that mean that with the amalgamation, the Caboolture and Redcliffe area would have actually been better off without the Pine Rivers area because of the culture they brought to the whole Moreton Bay region?
Well, I was hoping with the amalgamation, Pine Rivers would have been better off.
Has that been the case?
No.
So has amalgamation just been a bad thing in your view?
No. The only council I understand in Australia that was good from the very first and accepted by the ratepayers was Moonee Pond down in Victoria. And
Yep.
what they did was, I understand, they fired everyone and got all new people in.
Is that, in your view, what needs to happen with the Moreton Bay Regional Council?
Absolutely. We need fresh ideas. We need to think as one region, but we need to work for our local residents.
Craig Dunn, how long have you been campaigning for?
Not that long. In that, not 22 years, of course. But what I actually, I was planning to sort of start to kick off. Probably mid last year. Unfortunately, my grandmother passed away down south, so I had to take a bit of time there. I was okay. I thought January I'll kick back off. Fortunately, my mother passed away then. So what's happened is I really had to push everything back. I've been trying to still run my mum's business and my own and a few other things. So what I've done is it's probably only been the last month or so that I've really kicked off with the campaigning, because we're at the stage when I was probably at where I could then start to campaign. Unfortunately, we're in the heart of the state election, and from my point of view, people just, would have got sort of totally lost in all the issues. So I put it off, and really, probably the last week of the state campaign was when I then started to get out there.
You mentioned earlier that one of the reasons for the motivation of you putting your hand up was the way that the floods were handled around 2011 and 12. Where did they particularly fall down? What are the specific issues? Have you looked at this?
Yeah, one of the big issues, and I think this goes a lot across council in some other areas, is that they still have 3 different policies or disaster management plans. I think they now have one, but that's since the flood. That was, I suppose, more forced upon them. So what happened was, and this is again my understanding of it, was that yes, it was an extreme event, but not one of those disaster management plans was actually enacted. Now, whether that was because Narangba was old Caboolture but now is sort of Pine or what, I don't know, but I just know that a lot of people were left in the lurch. Some people actually, and the floods actually came into my street but were luckily about sort of 5 houses away. But I know people specifically and just said there was nothing from council. The only ones that were helping him at the time were Mark Ryan, the past state member, and I believe Chris Whiting was out there a little bit. Other than that, Bob Miller, no one was around, and I just think that the way in which it was handled, it was more the local community that were actually doing things and organising, for places where to stay and what have you.
We had the floods at 2011 and 2012. I see, Kate Hall, you're putting your hand up. We'll come to you very, very shortly. We had the floods at 2011, 2012. We've also had floods or storm events. Haven't been quite as bad, but would you accept that they've fixed all of those problems and that things are smooth now?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. There's still issues out there. As an example where we are, because there's still a lot of things that haven't been done to rectify those issues if we do get an extreme event like that.
What are some of those issues?
Okay, one of the big things is the Burpengary Creek. There's several areas along there where that either came over the banks or what have you, and only a month or so ago was the councillor with the council engineer, probably a bit longer than that, probably about six to 8 weeks ago, but came out, so after 12 months after the issue, came out with some engineering plans to have a look at what they were going to do, and still nothing's even started at this point in time. So I think that, a little bit better, yes, by all means. I'll give them a little bit of credit, but there's still a long way to go.
So what would you do to fix all of that?
What would I do? I'd be making sure that one of the big things is, I think that one of the great things they have done is to put in the alerts.
Yep.
By all means. I think that can be expanded out a little bit further. There's another organisation called EWN that I think does a really good role, and I'm actually on theirs and get more updates and information from them than what we do from the Morton Alerts.
Okay,
I can't remember emergence. I can't remember but it's EWN.
Yep.
Is who they are, and really having things in place pre-set up about that if in the event of.
What about that Burpengary area? You mentioned that the council has failed to sort out issues there. They've had engineers look at it. Would you just simply sort it out? Regardless of how much it costs?
Most definitely, and get it done. One of the big things is that when that rains all happen, well, not just even in January this year when we had the heavy rains, any time it rains, the people there are absolutely freaking out that it's going to happen again. Now,
are you talking about Dale?
No, on the other side. We're on the other side here
right.
in Narangba. It's the Forest Ridge, Narangba Valley sort of area, and
so they're actually experiencing similar.
Most definitely, not as severe. Most definitely not as severe, and I will give that. But with the extreme event that we had, it then played out that there was no one to help them from council. We then had a meeting. Mr. Miller, Councillor Miller, came down a few weeks after it, and people were just angry that there was no council there, and to be truthful, I think it was the way I felt. I went to the meeting was it was just water, probably wrong choice of words, but water off a duck's back when people were actually telling the council how bad things were.
Did Councillor Bob Miller have a response? Did he have a reason for the way things happened?
It was talking about the 1 in 1,000 years, and it was an extreme event, and that it happened that that I suppose that there was floods or issues happening right across the region, so their resources were thinned out, but people want action at their point, or their place, or if there's an issue, then not to be told that it was a big issue and everyone. So it's really a matter of getting in and fixing and working with those people as to what can be done.
Kate Hall, you wanted to comment on council and its disaster management policies. What's your view?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Andrew. I guess when door knocking and talking to residents, my biggest shock was in Narangba was that they had been flooded in 2008 and nothing had been done. They were completely ignored. They received letters saying it's 1 in 100 years. It won't happen. People said, 1 in 100 years. Well, then it happened again. And still nothing was done. They received letters saying it was 1 in 1,000 years.
Yep, so how would you fix this?
Well, some of these places that were flooded weren't there in 2008 at the first flood. Some of them weren't there. I think we need to look very carefully at development plans, floodplains, slippage areas. We shouldn't have any areas developed that can bring heartache, fear, break up families, and the families lose their investments because of council's bad decisions. Now we have Narangba, we have Whiteside that flooded, Debro that flooded. Landslips in Highvale, roads closed. Mount Mead Road is still being worked on. Mount Glorious Road, the PEI Road, is still being worked on.
So how do you
Still
speed these
closed.
things up? How do you make them happen
We
faster?
keep bugging the people that have to do the work.
What do you
If
just
it's a
throw-
state road, we keep bugging the state.
Yep.
These people live in high-risk areas for bushfires. Everybody says, well, bushfires, oh, it's so wet. But because of the undergrowth, it's going to be a problem if we get another drought.
So what do we do about that?
We make sure people are aware of the problems. We make sure that people realize that their gates, when they build in a rural area, has to be wider than 3.3 meters to get fire trucks through. We can have signs for people so they can put on the road in case of a bushfire. Dam water available here for the firefighters, because the firefighters come from different areas. There's so much we have to do, and this council really let us down when you hear the Ipswich mayor on TV saying, well, I want to thank Alan Sutherland for sending his heavy equipment and men down to help us with our floods. That gives everyone the idea that our neighbors are okay, and they weren't. They weren't.
Just to come back to one of the other issues that you raised at the start, the confidential private meetings and outcomes of those, do you accept that when commercial arrangements are being explored, so for example you've got two active tenderers for council work that are fighting against each other, if those aren't kept confidential, you effectively can destroy the tender process so that there isn't the best outcome for the ratepayer?
Absolutely, Andrew. And those are just a very small item in those 374.
How do you know
also,
that? How do you know that?
Because I've read the minutes. I've read every minute.
But if they're confidential, how would you know
They
what's
just
happening in those
list what they're
confidential
about.
meetings?
They just list what they're about. You never see the outcome. And I believe that after a tender, all those 374 items should have had the outcome printed when they were finalized. We should be able to see the tenders after the tender is given. We should be able to judge that as a ratepayer. That is our money that's being paid. It's funny because I've been calling a few companies and getting quotes for work.
Yep.
And you know what I'm beginning to think? As silly as it sounds, when you say wedding, what happens? When you say council tender, the same thing happens.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm
Do you
talking
want to
about?
elaborate a little bit?
Well, when you say wedding, everything goes up.
Yep.
When you say council tender, it goes up.
Do you now? What evidence do you base that on? Because the council would quite clearly come back. They would say to you that they've saved at least $100 million over this term. They would say to you that their tender process is extremely robust and that they would be able to look at specific areas, whether it be maintenance on parks, whatever, playing devil's advocate here, and say that they have actually driven the cost down to the ratepayer. What do you base your evidence on? Where is your evidence to suggest that it's like a wedding and the council goes, we want to put it out to tender and the price goes up, and that you haven't got 15 people coming in and saying we want to tender for that work because we'd like a big stable payer that we expect isn't going to go broke on us, so we'll just cut a bit and make it up on the roundabout?
May I say, have you benefited at all? Have you seen any improvements in our $100 million that supposedly the council
Well, you're just putting a
saved?
question with a question. Where's your evidence?
My evidence is that they do not release this information. You have to pay $40 for a right of information to get this information. They do not release it. So that's what I'm saying. Without transparency, they have no accountability. And that's what I'm saying. It needs to be transparent. And yes, I'm not saying that tenders need to be all publicized from the very beginning, all the different tenders. Yep. I'm saying that they need to be released when the tender is given so that the public can judge if our money is going to the best company for the best price.
And if you were to get elected, what's your commitment in relation to not just a release of information but the private meetings? Are they just completely out now?
Well, why do we have them? We own the council. We need to know. And this goes back to my love of property management. I put, how long would I have been employed if I would have called my owners and said, well, you can pay $40 for the lease, thank you, and it's a 50-year lease at $100 a week, but you only paid $4 million for the property. Aren't you lucky?
Okay, now let's just explore what you've just said there. You being a property manager with a private employer,
yes,
you sharing information with that employer to make sure that the employer's got the the best outcome
Yes.
is not then going to inadvertently have that information go back to the people that you're creating commercial agreements with. However, with council, you're saying that the employer is the ratepayer. Putting that information back to the ratepayer will inadvertently, straight away, get back to where the commercial agreements are being created and could change that outcome, could it not?
Well, the outcome's already given when it's released to the public. The outcome's already there. That person has the tender. But what it'll do is to be sure the council will be aware that the public scrutiny will be there in the future.
You also said that you'd do away completely with the private meetings. So how would you create these commercial agreements to start with?
I'm saying the private meetings are wrong.
So you don't have them? Bang, gone?
Well, anything that's said in council, we should know about. We should know about. If it's a confidential if it's an item that has money to do with it, then as soon as that item is settled, we have a right to know.
So you're still saying that there should be private meetings?
Yes, but we have a right to know at the outcome is.
Okay, so are you completely ruling out private meetings, or you're not?
Well, you can't rule out. I can't rule out anything. I would only be one councillor, and I'm counting on my electorate to be behind me if these problems keep occurring, saying we need to know what's happening with our money. We need to know. $100 million worth of savings. Have they told you where it come from? Andrew, have they told you where it's come from?
I'm in a fortunate position where I get to ask you the questions.
Okay.
Craig Dunn.
I just wondered.
Craig Dunn.
I won't ask any questions.
No, that's okay. Craig Dunn, what other things have you found that are on your radar leading into this election? Things that people are saying to you overwhelmingly, I want you to represent me this way.
Okay, big things are rates and water charges. One of the commitments that I'm standing on is that I'll limit any rate increases to CPI. I think that's something we have to do for the term of council. Also with the water, there's current water rate, water rebate that residents receive. I agree that should continue on. And do
you agree that the water entity Unity Water should continue to exist?
Okay, it is a tough question in that there's several ways. That's exactly right. Not as easy to answer. Look, as I've mentioned before, coming from 15 years in working in water and understanding some of those have been where they've been part of council and other ones are standalone. Like in New South Wales, I work for Sydney Water, the biggest water authority in Australia. I think that standalone water authorities, I suppose per se, are an ideal situation.
Why is that?
Well, one of the issues that happens that I've seen in councils is that money that comes in for water and sewerage charges doesn't necessarily get put aside for upgrading of the infrastructure. It goes, I suppose, into a bit of consolidated revenue and gets farmed out into other things. If it's a water authority or like Unity Water, its charter should really be that it is about making sure that not only are people paying for the supply of water, but also for the future of upgrades and things like that that happen throughout and maintenance.
Does that mean that you're at odds with the new LNP state government, where they've emphatically said we want to see those water entities return to the councils?
Well, it's still a bit clouded on what they want, because I did hear one time where they talked about going back to one of the models that the original state government was looking at, which was a one standalone distribution company.
Because there were actually different models presented to the councils,
there were several models, and without getting into the state side of thing, I suppose, at the time, actually, Councillor Newman was the one that put up the current... sorry, not Councillor Newman, Premier Newman now, was the one that actually put up the current model, is my understanding. They were going down another path, and then from representations from the Council of Mayors and Premier Newman, that's where they ended up with the model we now have. But look, I really think we have to sort of really wait and see what comes out from that. I'm open to either way. To be truthful, it's not that I'm saying we should stay with Unity Water. If people, and I suppose if it comes out that there's enough push that people want it to come back to council, it's something we should seriously look at. Cost prohibit, depending on the cost of it. There were some figures that came out last year of $100 million, $140 million or something, which I think may have been a bit over the top. But maybe in the new council, it's something that we should look at.
Can I just put a scenario to you? It has happened. Unity Water paid a dividend of in excess of $70 to $75 million to council. We had a subsidy then, so it effectively took it in with one hand, the council, and then gave it back with another hand. and you've just said that you want to see subsidies go on. Is that the best model, or should Unity Water have a lower price point to start with?
It would be better to have a lower price point. As I mentioned again, before working in the water industry, I can remember many years ago, a CEO of Sydney Water actually talking about the ideal model for water, and it's something that I actually agree with, is that we shouldn't have any rates and charges we shouldn't have any availability charges. All right, the part of your accounts is you've got an availability charge,
access charge,
and you've got a water usage. What we should really be doing if we're fair dinkum is changing, and it's going to take. You can't do it tomorrow. It is going to take time, but I believe the ideal model is to use to a total user pay system where you don't have any. You move the cost of water up.
So you're talking about going to a similar system that Energex has historically come from, SEQEB and then Energex. Now you got the retailers, as in, I can't think it. There's a heap of them anyway that you can go get signed up. But predominantly, your electricity bill is made up of usage. You have a nominal fee to rent the meter that sits out the front. Is that what you're looking at?
Ideally, yes, because what it does is it then allows people to, I suppose, manage their bill to a point. The less water you use, if it's all only a user pay system, it's same as electricity. The less that you use, the less you're going to pay. There's got to be parameters about large families and different things because they're going to use a lot more. And I know in Sydney Water they had that model to a point where if you had a large family, you could actually apply and they would give you a certain.
We're getting into technicalities now, but what about you have sewerage investment and infrastructure? You need to invest in that. There's no meters on that, and it doesn't appear to be an easy way to put a meter on sewage that leaves the home. How do you, and that becomes a part of the access charge, how do you make that fair?
It's still as part of the water usage. It's just as when you work out your water usage actual charge,
water comes in,
that's right. Yeah, water comes in, water comes out. A lot of that also with your.
I thought you were going to deliver a few puns there. You're listening to 4AUR 101.5 FM. It's a morning magazine. We're at 15 minutes to the top of the hour. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. 12 minutes to the top of the hour. You are listening to 4AUR 101.5 FM. It's a morning magazine. We are taking a detailed look at Division 11 of the Moreton Bay Regional Council as we approach the election on April 28. Remember, you get to exercise your democratic right. That's something that in many countries they are still fighting for. You get to set the direction of the Moreton Bay Regional Council for the next 4 years, and 4AUR is playing its little part in bringing you the information and presenting the different candidates and incumbents, should they turn up, throughout the Moreton Bay region so that you can make an informed decision as you approach those polls. We have with us both Kate Hall and Craig Dunn. You guys have survived so far?
Yes. Going well.
Look, we're into the last segment here. Kate Hall.
Yes.
Why should people vote for you? Why should they vote for you over your other opponents?
Because I care.
Okay, that's a really short and emphatic answer.
I know, but I do. I care, and I see what's wrong. I see the waste. I see what our council's not telling us. That they tell one group of people one thing, they tell another group of people another thing. I will not do that. I will have meetings, the minutes will be recorded with any resident group, and I will present them in general business at the next council meeting. So there's no misunderstandings. Oh, we didn't say that, you've misunderstood me. None of that. We need to have open, honest, transparent, and accountability to me, to whoever's standing, whoever your council is, has to be accountable for what they are doing.
How will you uphold that? How will you uphold that? And you've just said very emphatically that you promised that.
Yes.
If you're one of 11 other councillors and a mayor that decide that they want to take it in a different direction. And bear in mind that the state government quite regularly presents documents to councillors that have very, very clearly printed all over it that they're they're a confidential and controlled document, and they're also bound by legislation. So you could find yourself in jail if you do decide to break those rules.
Well, just think of the picture the newspaper would love, Andrew, of a little old grandma sitting in jail, drinking bread and water.
Look, I've got to be totally honest, I was actually hoping for that answer because that creates a great news cycle.
No, but, I believe...
Craig Dunn, can we get the same commitment?
No, I'm not a little granny, I'm sorry.
And I'm not either, but I am a grandmother, and I'm a proud one. But, no, there are items that have to be kept confidential, but as soon as they aren't, we should know about what's happening.
Yeah.
We shouldn't wait to hear it third or fourth
this leads
hand.
me to another question.
Yes,
Is your
Andrew?
conviction that strong that
Yes.
if you were in possession of a controlled document and you really thought in your own mind morally this should be public knowledge, are you prepared to contravene legislation on your beliefs?
Well, what I would do is try to get it to be changed in the legislation. Then the legislation is wrong. The legislation is wrong. State, federal, and council, I believe, do not have the right to keep information that affects our lives, affect our council, secret. And after the decisions are made, we need to have open and public discussion on things.
Craig Dunn, can you add to that? What's your feeling in relation to, you haven't really had much to say about the confidential meetings and then the outcomes?
Look, the confidential meetings is something that do have to happen, but not to the level that they have. I believe that there are issues which, in all businesses, that, you know, like with a business as an example, you don't go and tell your employees about everything. You keep some things, and I suppose to a point with this, you're not going to be able to tell and release things. I do believe what Kate said, that we need to at least have an outcome of confidential things. As an example, one of the big things that I was actually thinking about with confidential meetings, and I suppose one of the examples would be when there's enterprise bargaining agreements, negotiations going on between council and staff, whenever that comes up. You couldn't have an open council meeting where council is going to discuss, you know, those things. So things like that. So there has to be issues, but there should be somewhere within the minutes when those things come out, that what the outcome is of it.
Absolutely.
So when they're having a confidential meeting, they should have in mind a projected outcome date and then a projected publication date.
Like you do when you do any planning or what have you, you know, you have an action, times, dates and what have you, something along those lines, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Kate Hall, you're into big commitments. One of those commitments that you've made in an advertisement is that you will undertake that during your term or while you're elected as a Moreton Bay Regional Councillor, you won't enter into any property transactions within the Moreton Bay Regional Council whatsoever, in or out.
Absolutely.
What happens if you do unfortunately fall on hard financial times? The way that that's presented, it's so emphatic, and that seems to be the way that you do things. But you couldn't even sell your family home.
On the salary that the councillors made, if I get into trouble, I'll tell you, it would be big trouble.
Big trouble
Isn't
in
that
Little
true?
Kawangba.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know.
Craig Dunn, what's your view on such transactions for you as a councillor?
Yeah, most definitely. As I do agree with Kate as best you can. There might be issues like that do come up. So I suppose it's difficult to be a bit that emphatic because we can't all see what's going to happen tomorrow. But I definitely, you know, my campaign's totally self-funded. I would in no way take donations from developers or anyone like that. I believe that just totally clouds the issue, and even if a developer's involved with any councillors or mayor or anyone and they put a development up, there's always going to be a perception that there's something underhanded going on, even if all the boxes are ticked, because there's that view out there that it's just wrong.
Generally, at this point in time, the councillors, mayors, elected representatives, if there's a conflict of interest, they then exclude themselves from those meetings and those decisions. Is that acceptable? Do you think that's actually good enough?
I think that I do believe that if there is a conflict of interest, like as an example, I'm actually the vice president of a junior AFL club in Narangba. If I was on council and something came up about that, I would have to put that out there that there's a conflict of interest, and whether I should be voting on that or what have you.
Do the elected representatives go far enough in that vein now?
No, I don't think they do. And I was actually at a council meeting where Councillor Whiting actually put his hand up, and it was to do with the new Burpengary AFL precinct down near the Aquatic Centre. He actually excluded himself from the meeting, and it got halfway down through going through it, and then actually the current mayor actually went, "Oh, hold on a minute, with the Paradise Road development down the road, that it's all near. Should I have a conflict of interest?" So I think that really people have to be open and go as far as they can in providing those conflicts of interest. However, what you should be doing is limiting those conflicts of interest also, in that you don't take donations from developers and things like that. That really, other than things that maybe are in your own personal life. Like with my AFL or what have you, that's when then you're only limiting your conflicts of interest to handful sort of thing.
To an interest sake,
That's
yeah.
right.
What about your view, Kate Hall?
Cattle. Kate.
Kate Hall.
Kate.
I said it very quickly, didn't
yeah,
I?
You said it very quick.
We're running out of time. You've got 4 minutes.
I believe that the counselors aren't under any legal obligation to declare any conflict of interest. It's up to their moral standings. And many times they do not. They do not.
Yeah,
And
to
that
have an
stack
interest
of
register,
papers-
and there's legislation around that. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. But they don't have to, in a meeting, declare a conflict of interest.
Kate Hall, if people want to know more about you leading up to April 28, how do they get in contact with you?
Oh, they can call me. I'd love to talk to everyone. 04276 33329.
How many constituents have you got?
Pardon?
How many constituents have you potentially got in Division 11?
Well, there's 20,000, about 20,000 that can vote.
Kate Hall wants to talk with all of them. I suspect
I
Craig
do.
Dunn's the
I
same.
care
Craig
about
Dunn.
you all.
How do people get in contact with you if they want to have a chat?
Thank you, Andrew, and yes, I will also talk to them all. 2 ways, actually. I'd like people to go to my website, which is Craig Dunn, or one word, .net, so CraigDunn.net, or give me a call on 0414 767 354.
There you go. You're listening to 4AUR 101.5 FM. We're at 3 minutes to the top of the hour. We will take a break, and then it'll be into the locally produced news. The news team is out there putting it together as we speak. Remember, you can get involved. Give us a call on 54951015, or jump onto the website www.1015fm.com.au, or if you're that way inclined, drop us an email, radio@1015fm.com.au. Remember, it's your station. Have your say.